This is the first in 4 videos that are going to explore what stronger recovery and renewal stories might look like at the intersection of COVID-19 and the environmental crises facing us. This first video introduces us to stories and the central tool that we've been using to explore the narratives and stories that are surrounding COVID-19 and the environmental movement at this time. Guy, over to you.
Thanks, Ben. So just by way of an introduction, we're really interested in story being able to make change happen faster. And so this idea of the tool is to basically think, well, how can story be improved in terms of its strategic contribution to making change happen? How can storytelling be sharpened so that we're telling stories that actually do their best to kind of trigger change? And then also, how do we develop our skills so that we will become stronger storytellers? But to start off with, why do stories matter? Well, we've been telling them for hundreds of thousands of generations. In fact, for 95% of the time that we've been verbally communicating, we've only been telling a type of story. And so we have become hardwired in the sense that we have physiologically developed kind of neurowiring, which is responsive to the types of stories that we tell. Clearly, the relationship that story has with myths and narratives is super important. The bit that we want to focus on is between story and narrative. And to give you a quick example, in the early days of the coronavirus, as we were calling it then, not COVID-19, a very important idea needed to be established around washing hands stops the spread. And so you saw lots and lots of different stories that were helping to back up and establish that narrative. So whether that was singing happy birthday, or whether it was about school children doing the pepper test. And clearly in climate, you can sort of see there are lots of different narratives at different points. One narrative that really kind of grew, particularly between April and July last year, was Act Now to Stop Breakdown. And the different types of stories ranged from, I guess, the IPCC establishing this idea of 12 years through to XR's declaration of a climate emergency, all the way through to, say, Mark Carney as Governor of Bank of England saying, change or die. Here's quite an important thing, which is an overview about how you use stories to make change happen. The first thing is that the only thing that can replace a story is a better story. The second, that it takes many better stories to change a narrative. Third, that because we're sort of hardwired for them, we should use the story patterns that we instinctively recognize. Fourth, that we're using an outer journey to bring to life an inner journey of change. So stories play a really important role when we're talking about emotions and attitudes that you can't normally see, about bringing those to life. And then finally, that actually we need to keep the story moving so that people feel in control. This presentation is just going to look at the first 3. And just to give you an example of what we mean when we say the only thing that can replace a story is a better story, is to think all the way back to Blue Planet 2 and the relationship between the story of the mother whale and the dead calf that she was nursing over a number of days, because it was inferred that she was had ingested plastic, and that had caused the death of the calf. And the other stories within Blue Planet 2 that talked about plastics in the ocean, the impact on kind of wildlife, and how that suddenly caused a massive shift in society around our attitudes to disposable single-use plastics. Now, we had known about the danger of unsustainable plastics for years, but it took that story rather than facts to trigger change. And when we look over the last sort of 18 months, we can sort of see an alignment of lots and lots of stories all pulling in the same direction. And then that's when we start to get narrative shift. What we want to be doing is using those patterns that we instinctively understand. And for us, a pattern that's extremely helpful is the hero's journey, which was first identified by Joseph Campbell, an academic in the 1940s, who looked at over 40,000 different stories and tried to find a common structure. This has since sort of been backed up with universities like Harvard and Stanford being able to do so, running algorithms over hundreds of thousands of stories to establish this pattern. It's called the hero's journey. It has been hidden within religious texts, within Greek myths, within penny dreadfuls, within sort of Aboriginal legends. There are 17 steps for the structure. There are 9 which really are key for stories about change. And this is what we're going to do, is just establish what each of these 9 steps are. We're going to do this because, or using Hollywood films, just because it's very easy to understand the pattern because it's so prevalent in all the kind of films that we've watched. And actually, Star Wars, which is probably the most popular culture story of the last kind of 60, 70 years, was created by George Lucas, who was actually a student of Joseph Campbell's. But all stories that I guess are sort of, kind of tent poles, like Jaws, Alien, Shawshank Redemption, When Harry Met Sally, they'll all fit the pattern. And it's not just films out of Hollywood, but the highest grossing film, Dangal in India, Wandering Earth, the highest grossing film in China, all fit the pattern too. It's not just about Hollywood. The successful stories within the environment movement, and we've looked at so far about 65 successful and unsuccessful stories. The successful ones like Silent Spring or the Green Belt movement very clearly kind of fit this pattern. And then also some of the adjacent sectors and stakeholders within the environment movement. So thinking about businesses, the ones that have been able to start to make a change, again, use this kind of pattern very well, and even movements themselves. Extinction Rebellion having a really, really, really clear and succinct story that fits. So these 9 building blocks for a story of change, I'm just going to chat you through them. Everyday hero, this is absolutely a kind of key step. It's all about the oxytocin. It's all about the empathy. Without empathy, we're not going to care about someone taking a journey of change. So Star Wars is a good example in the sense that it's set in space. None of us have been to space. However, Luke is set up as a bored teenager. And that is something universal that we can all sort of experience. Really important point to make is that although we need a hero box, we need that for a community or a group for change to happen to. Very, very rarely is it individual. We're talking about more the Rebel Alliance than we're talking Luke Skywalker. Continuing the theme of sort of empathy building, we need to know about the ordinary world. This is really to build up the idea that something is frustrating and something needs to change, like a niggle has kind of gone far enough. If you're Luke, clearly working on a moisture farm in a desert planet is pretty boring. If you add in a oppressive galactic empire, it gets worse. But it's not enough to change. So we need a villain to be defeated. Really kind of key here, and sort of hinted at when I talked about an inner journey and an outer journey, that the villain is a representation of the selfish attitude and behavior which is detrimental to the kind of good of the group. So here it sort of manifested itself in kind of Darth Vader, but those are some of the kind of attributes that we're looking for. Change is hard, so we've got to have either a push or a pull to kind of get us going on a journey of change, which is the call to adventure. And in Star Wars, this includes a kind of a cry for help. And then very tightly aligned with a call to adventure is a crossing the threshold. So once you've started, we don't want you to stop. So this is about a threshold. It's about a point of no return, and it's about your commitment to the story. it's very unlikely that a hero is going to be able to defeat a villain without help. The point of the kind of story is to bring other people on a journey of change with you and to make your journey of change successful. So you're going to need people that have got other skills that you don't have, other attitudes. Clearly, again, if you're kind of Luke and you've got to get onto a Death Star and then get away from it, it's very helpful to have the universe's best smuggler with the fastest ship. Slightly different to allies is the idea of a mentor, and the mentor really represents someone who has taken a big part of the journey already, and so a lot of the wisdom and the gifts that they can pass on are key. Actually, Star Wars is quite helpful here for just flagging something which hopefully is obvious to everybody, that the patriarchy, which is, you know, part of this sort of systemic problem, obviously in storytelling terms, is often represented with the wise, grey-bearded old man. Clearly, again, mentors can be groups, they can be organizations. It's just people that are able to step in and help us when we need it most. The bulk of the story is around the 3 challenges. These need to escalate in scale, because by overcoming each challenge, we build confidence that we're going to be able to defeat the villain. The struggle and jeopardy is really, really important in part of storytelling. We need to be honest about how difficult it is and honest about the help that we need, because that's what's actually going to draw people into our story and want to see us be successful. And very often these can be used in terms of both, or all of, like a human challenge, a financial challenge, and very often a technical challenge. And then the better world. So this is what we're kind of striving for. This is our vision of the future. It's really, really important that there's circularity, but also, again, you know, to use Star Wars as an example, the better world is not blowing up with the Death Star. It's about coming back, having had inner change, inner kind of growth, and the clue is actually in the name of the film, which is called A New Hope. So that's really the better world for Star Wars. It's a kind of group of people that are now emboldened to make further change happen because of the hope that they've won. So that's the framework. We have then been using it to diagnose and analyze story. The version that I've just kind of shown you, the Hollywood version, is easy to understand, but it's sort of a chronological version of a hero going on a journey and reaching the better world. That's not how real life works. So we've created this canvas version. The benefit also is that it allows you to sketch out very, very rapidly lots and lots and lots of different types of stories. And that's super important, not only because we need to understand from different people's perspectives, but also we need to kind of explore different possibilities. There's a little bit more information about the questions that you might want to ask yourself when filling in the canvas. And that's it for video 1.
Thanks very much, Guy.